Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So I've got another Squier on the bench today. I know that's not the most exciting thing in the world, but this is a little bit different one. This is a Squier Standard from 2013. The difference in the Standard and the Affinity seems to be the body thickness to me, and also the number of frets, but we'll see if there's any more differences inside that are noticeable. This one actually has a little bit of a problem that I need to address today. It actually makes no sound through the pickups. If I plug it into an amplifier, I just get buzzing and really weak sound. It's more just like an interruption to the buzzing than anything else. So we'll get started trying to address those problems today. We'll take it apart, we'll inspect the insides, I'll show you the components, and we'll put it back together, hopefully in working condition. So let's get started with that today. So believe it or not, when I bought this thing, I actually pulled it out of a guy's barn, and the strings are all rusted. The thing was covered in dust. I'm just lucky that all the hardware itself is not completely rusted out. It looks like it's in really good shape. Other than that though, the finish on it is really nice. There's really not too many dings or scratches. The neck doesn't have any massive dings on it or anything. The frets look nice, other than maybe having been set too long without being played. And I think just a quick oil of the fretboard and maybe some light steel wool on the frets will take care of that. There's a little bit of yellowing in the plastics, but I think it's fine. I mean, I don't know what's gone on with the nut. The nut's turned brown. Could be a replacement. I doubt it. I'll have to figure out if I can clean that up. I've already blown this thing off with my air compressor. That was step one, and I really didn't want to show that on camera because this sound is quite offensive. Got all the dust out from in between the pickups and in the bridge, and the dust that was stuffed down in the truss rod hole and everything else. I did notice when I was doing that this jack is pretty loose, and I think that's probably the issue with the guitar and the sound. Even though I'm pretty sure it's there and I could probably just take this plate off and start there, I'm going to go ahead and detune, take the strings off, take the pick guard out and all that stuff, not only to show you what's inside, but just to inspect all the components myself to make sure that everything's okay. I will mention, you want to always check out neck relief while you have strings on. Is really the only time you can check neck relief. You can check for a functioning truss rod without strings on, but you don't really know if it's going to bring you within specs. So always check your neck relief out first. These strings are so rusted, I'm just going to cut through them in the middle, pull them out both sides, and not worry about saving them. I don't know why that high E string always has to be such a problem on these rusted out guitars. It always seems like it sticks in there, but I've got a small punch that I've reserved just for that purpose, to shove down in that hole and shove that ball back through the back of the tremolo block. But anyway, got that out. So let's see, what would be next? Oh, let me show you one thing that I noticed while I was taking the strings off. So these tuners are quite a bit loose, especially like this one. There's a couple of them that are like that. And these are the style of tuners that they don't have a mounting screw on the back. They just mount with a post. So on these style of tuners specifically, you really need to pay attention to the tightness of that nut on the face of the peg head. You need to make sure that thing is tightened down. So let's go ahead and take this neck off, I think, next. Well, there was no real reason to take this off. I just wanted to do it out of curiosity more than anything else. So this neck is constructed similar to the American and Mexican 22 fret necks, where it's got the overhang on the standard heel. And the body here, it's definitely not alder. I don't know what it is actually. It looks like maybe some kind of mahogany almost, or agathis or something, but it's definitely got a heavy grain in it, and it's got a cap that's like a flame maple top, like sort of, I don't know, veneer maybe. You don't see a veneer line when you look at this transparent finish through the side, but there's just a very thin veneer on top, but it's definitely solid wood, so that's a good deal. Also, this is a full thickness body, I can tell just by looking at it, just to verify that. Yeah, 1.8 with the finish, so that's a 1.75 inches without the finish. So that's a full thickness body. Alright, next let's take off the pick guard. So before I lift this up, I'll just say I can tell right now a little bit about the pickups. They've got staggered pole pieces, which is interesting. I can already tell it's got a cheap switch. You can tell a cheap switch without even opening a guitar up by the thickness or width of the post that the switch tip mounts to. So like if it's that thin, you can already tell it's one of those cheaper style switches. And you can also see a lot of the metal outline of the just like the silver around where the switch body is, right through the pick guard. So just some things you can look out for. Alright. Oh, nice. Well, this is a significant difference from the Affinity that I opened up earlier. The Affinity had no shielding in the cavity here, and this one actually has a fully shielded cavity that's also grounded to this pot. It's got Alnico pickups, which are quite nice looking from the bottom anyway. Cheap switch and mini pots, cheap mini pots. So none of that is actually a surprise, and this could all be upgraded significantly. I imagine the jack could be too, but nothing really looks wrong in here, so I suspect my issue with the guitar making no sound is probably in the jack itself. Well, that's the issue. The ground has broken away from the lug on the jack here, so we've got to fix that. Let me heat up the soldering iron and we'll come back to that. Okay, well, this is our issue. And I've gone ahead and cleaned off a little blob of solder that was on the end of the wire here. And that just needs to go back into the ground connection for the jack. And I think what the problem was originally is that the wire actually didn't go through the hole in the lug. It just laid on top of the lug and they soldered it that way. And it wasn't enough of a mechanical connection to keep the connection over time. So let me give it a little bit more of a mechanical bite there, and then we will solder that back together. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it. I think while I'm in here I'm going to go ahead and reflow the other one, just because this apparently was a weak point in the past. With the soldering done, we just need to reinstall the jack into the plate and reinstall the nut and washer. Ideally, I would like to see a star washer on the back side of this. I don't have one in the appropriate size, and the factory did not include one. I'm just putting it back together like this for now. The nice thing about a jack on a Stratocaster is that you don't have to take apart a bunch of things to get to it. So if I want to put a star washer on the back of that later, I definitely can get to it pretty easily. Well, I'm going to grab a socket wrench and see if I can get down and tighten that better. So even without strings, I should be able to check and see if that pickup fix worked, and we'll see. Yeah, so it seems like everything's working now, and I don't have that horrible hum that I had when I first started, so I think this thing's safe to put back together. I am going to go ahead and spray some contact cleaner in all the pots just to make sure. So before I put this thing back together totally, I want to make sure that I measure some things inside here for you, just to make sure we know exactly what kind of components we're dealing with. So one thing I noticed before I flip this back over is that the pole pieces on all the pickups are the same width on each pickup. So it's different than some guitars where you'll see like a 52 millimeter spacing here and a 50 here and a 48 here, just to kind of account for the strings coming closer together as they approach the nut. These are all 50 millimeter. which actually I think is kind of a weird standard for them to settle on, but I think that's probably because the bridge is a bit narrower than some of the bridges that you might see on an American model or a Mexican model for that matter. Looks like this one is probably about 2 1/16 spacing. Alright, so let's measure some pickups. Okay, so in this guitar it looks like the pickups are measuring about 5.33 on the bridge. These are kilo ohms, by the way. 5.14 on the middle pickup, and 5.03 on the neck pickup. That gives you kind of an idea of their hotness of their output, which isn't much. They're just kind of standard vintage style single coils. All the pots are 250K. The capacitor is a 0.022 microfarad. That's all there is to say about this. Okay, well, I'm going to reinstall this pick guard. I did want to mention that whenever I disassemble these, I usually take the volume and tone knobs off just to clear out any of the plastic that was left over from when somebody peeled the pick guard plastic off, because a lot of times I can make these pots loose again, and it was doing that on these last two pots. So took that off, cleaned out the plastic and retightened the nuts, and everything's back to normal again. Let me go ahead and reinstall these screws. Thought I'd go ahead and open up the back just to see what's going on in here, and I kind of wish I hadn't. But anyway, there's 2 springs in here where there really should be 3. I know that's somewhat of a personal preference, but I'm going back to the standard of 3. It's got a small block tremolo, which means that the thickness of a normal Strat tremolo is about double this, and this is typical for import models though. Other than that, I can tell that the body is at least probably a 5-piece body. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for sure, maybe more. But you can see that sort of heavy grained agathis or mahogany or whatever it is on the back here, which is different from that flame maple on the front. I guess the only other thing to note is that the tremolo cavity itself is not shielded, which is pretty typical as well. So let me fix the orientation of these 2 springs and install a third. Okay, well, this is a good starting point for setup next time. Well, I was just about to put the back plate back on, and I realized I probably can't do that yet because I need to set the strings or springs up for the next string change. But I thought I'd show you real quick the difference in the color on the front and the back of the guitar. Like, there is a massive difference in the amount that this pickguard has yellowed versus the back. You can also see that in some tan lines that it's got up around the neck pocket, and underneath the knobs was the same way. And everything, you know, on top here is faded to the same color or yellowed to the same color, but you know, it's just something to be careful of. Like, when you leave your guitar exposed to sunlight, this is the kind of stuff that can definitely happen. So just something to be aware of. Some people like this look, so if you want to do it on purpose, sunlight over time is a good way to do it. So one last measurement. I want to check this heel width just to make sure that it's the same as the other Squiers that I've seen. This one is 2.18 inches, maybe just a hair over. And this pocket is the same. Alright, well, skipping ahead a little bit, I reattached the neck. The neck is just 4 screws. You know how to do that. I've put a set of junk strings on here just temporarily so I could do a quick setup. And I really didn't have to do much in terms of a setup. I looked at it and the action was maybe a 64th too high. Remember, the spec is 4/64ths at the 17th fret. You can tune to your preference from there, but that's the spec. So I set it back down to 4/64ths by basically lowering these bridge posts, probably a turn each, and they're now right in line, at least with the E strings. And then the neck relief, I had to loosen the truss rod just maybe an 1/8 of a turn. Just, it didn't have enough relief. I don't know if the string gauge is different than it was or not. It's kind of hard to get a reading on those rusty strings, but I've got a set of 9s on here now, and I've got my pickup height adjusted a little bit. I had to lower them all just slightly because when I brought the action down, this neck pickup was hitting the strings. But now that that's all done, The pickups all work. So everything, everything's functioning the way it should. None of the pots are giving me any issues with any weird scratchiness or anything like that, and the volume's working. So that's really it for this Stratocaster here. Overall, I'd say that this model is most similar to an American Stratocaster or a Mexican Stratocaster as compared to the other Squiers I've seen. I don't know if the standard is still being produced today, but you can definitely find these online pretty cheap in the used market. I would say that it's really good value for the money. I mean, I hardly paid anything for this one, but of course it was broken, and the guy was just getting it out of his barn. With a little elbow grease, maybe you can find a deal like that too. I appreciate you guys liking and commenting on my videos. I also appreciate when you guys hit the subscribe button. I hope you guys like what you see here. If there's anything that you would like to see me do in the future, please feel free to leave that in a comment, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks a lot.